Hey everyone, hope you're all doing well. Thank you so much for joining in today. I am Aditya Obray. I'm one of the coaches here at Major League Hacking. Thank you so much for being a part of Local Hack Day Share this year. Hey Rishit, hey. So while we wait for some more folks to just join in, let's have a little round of introductions here in the chat. And do let me know where you're joining in from. I think that would be absolutely lovely to know. Hey Mohit, thank you so much for joining in. Also, do let me know how Local Hack Day Share has been for you this year, because I think this year has definitely been one of the most fun editions of Local Hack Day. Share at least has been great, to be honest. So I'd absolutely love to know how it's going for you. We do have folks joining in. Hey. So yeah, while we still have folks just trickling in, let me just tell you a little bit about today's session. So today, the session, this one is focused on using GPS or maps technologies to build a little project for ourselves. So I think this is an idea that I've had in mind ever since the last video session. So today we're going to be bringing together quite a few different technologies. We're going to have a little bit of Xamarin, a little bit of Azure Functions. We're going to throw in the Google Maps Geocoding API there as well. And we're going to have Twilio once again. So I think that sounds like a nice little bunch of technologies. They're all sounding very exciting. And I see we have some enthusiasm in the chat as well. You awesome. Wow, Rishit, that's great to hear. I'm so happy that you've had a great time at your first local hack day. It's absolutely lovely to see. And I feel that local hack day share at least is very special for me because the first MLH event I organized was a local hack day share event. So when we used to have in-person events, local hack days used to be conducted by communities, and that was actually a very similar idea as to what the guilds are. So instead of guilds, it used to be just localized events, and that was just at the time when we had transitioned into a virtual mode last year. So local hack day share was my first MLH event that I organized. And yeah, local hack days used to be online, or used to be offline. They used to be in person in the past. So definitely, local hack day share has been a great experience for me this year, especially. Now, while we're at it, let's just make sure that we're registered for this event and checked in for this event as well. So I'm just gonna throw in the check-in link. It should be visible to you in the chat. Please make sure that you hop over and that you're checked in to this event and this activity. That would be a good place to begin. And yeah, in the meanwhile, please do let me know where you're joining in from, because I'd love to I'd love to know, I'd love to see, and I'd love to give a few shout outs there as well. So yeah, I guess, I hope folks are checked in now. So we can begin um, with this session. Just the last few slides. Hey, wow, Gujarat, that's really cool. I'm here in Dehradun right now in Uttarakhand. So, cool to know. Awesome. So, as I mentioned that we're working on an SOS application here, um, there are going to be a few steps. There are going to be two parts to the application that we're going to build today. So, the first part is a Xamarin.Forms application. We do need an Azure account for this application, but you can, if you're a student, you can actually get free credits through the GitHub Student Developer Pack or via the Azure for Students offer. And that is going to be available at ek.ms/a4s. I've sent the link in the chat. If you can either use this, so if you have the GitHub Student Developer Pack, that also has Azure credits, so you can use those. And if you have a student ID, you then in that case you do not need to use a credit card. So that's typically, I mean, if you need Azure credits, that's definitely the way to go. So there are going to be two facets to this application. The first is a Xamarin.Forms application, where we will essentially get the coordinates of where we are, the exact geolocation of where we are, and we're gonna send that over, we're gonna use that and call the Azure function, which is gonna be the second part. The Azure function will have the Google Geolocation API to reverse geocode and get the address. And after that, using that address, we're gonna basically use Twilio programmable SMS to send out an SOS message. So those are gonna be the two parts of this application. The first part that I wanna work at is our Azure function. I think that's the part where I'm gonna work first. So I guess we can begin working on that. Let me just bring back my screen once again. And I'm just going to be putting us here a little at the side. But so I keep answering and checking questions from time to time. So make sure you keep those coming in. That's going to be totally cool. And we're going to get ready with the show. So let me just bring my screen back up again. It's just going to take a second. Okay, I hope my screen is up and running now. So as you can see, that's VS Code. That's the editor I'm going to use to basically work on my Azure function. VS Code, I believe, is a code editor that we're all used to and one that we all love. I think it's an absolutely great code editor. It has a variety of features and extensions to just make our life as developers easier. So VS Code is definitely my code editor of choice, and it's definitely the one recommended for Azure Functions as well, along with Visual Studio IDE. But I'm going to use VS Code in this case. So in order to build an Azure function, the first thing you need is you need to have the Azure Functions extension installed. So you can actually go ahead, search that in the extensions marketplace, and you'll be able to see it here. And of course, if you're using any Azure services, the Azure account extension is a given because you'll need that to sign in. But that's typically that's definitely something you're gonna have already in case you're working with Azure. If not, that's also a good one to install right now. Azure Functions extension is gonna be needed because it will allow us to create functions very comfortably with the code scaffolding, the code generator that's already present. So we're gonna be using this extension here. And what I'm going to do is I am just going to go ahead. I'm going to, because I have the Azure functions in the Azure account and extension installed, I have this little Azure icon on my tray here, on the left. So I'm just going to go ahead on functions and I'm going to create a new project. When I create a new project, I can select where I want to keep it. I'll just create it on the desktop for the time being. So, or, I can create a new directory just for this session. So I think that would actually be a good thing to do. So what I'm going to do is here in new folder, I'm going to keep LHD share GPS workshop. That is the name of the directory. You can feel free to choose any directory that you want. This is just something I'm doing for my own convenience. So I'm going to select this directory. And I'm going to work with C#. You can actually choose any of these options. So once I choose C#, if you're also going to be working with C#, you're going to see two of these runtimes. You'll see .NET Core 3, which is in long-term support, and you'll see .NET 5. I'm going to go with .NET Core 3.1 because it is a little more stable. .NET 5, while has been released openly for all, I have still seen some issues. At times, at least that's on my local device. So that might not be for everyone, but I just want to make sure that we have a more comfortable experience. Plus .NET Core 3 works great. So that's the one I'm going to go with. For the template, we're actually going to go with the HTTP trigger this time, since we're going to be calling this function using an HTTP request from a Xamarin.Forms application. So I'm going to be using HTTP trigger. Now, what I want to call this function, I guess I'll just call it as GPS Twilio, because that's the most basic definition of what we're going to be doing. So I'll just do that. As far as the namespace goes, you can go with the default option or you can go with my function. Either is all right. It's not an issue. And I'm going to go ahead with anonymous. As you know, this is a function that is designed just for my personal use. I think the anonymous option is great. With the anonymous option, I do not need to send a separate authorization key. So it's actually totally cool if you know when you're testing or just building for yourself, it works well. And I'm going to open this in the current window. I mean, we've already got this nice little VS Code window open. So I'm going to open it here. So VS Code, I mean, this extension here is going to create a little project for me. And it's going to open it here. So as you see, it's actually created this little file here with the template. And this is just a basic, essentially a Hello World application here. Now, if you can see, you know, it's already brought in a few namespaces for me, and I'm really happy it's got the Newtonsoft Json one. This is the one that I personally prefer using for whenever I need to work with JSON strings. So it's a great, it's one of the best NuGet packages and one of the most useful NuGet packages for any C# developer. Now let me just glance at the chat here as well. All right. Why C sharp? Well, why not? I just love working with C sharp and .NET. I think it's a great language. It's good to work with, and it's definitely very powerful. So C sharp is just my preferred language. But that being said, if you want to work with JavaScript, TypeScript, those are all great options. Python is always there, so you can work with any of those. So that's just a little answer to why C sharp. That's just my personal preference. I love working with C sharp. And yeah, one thing, at least if you're using any Azure services, C Sharp is definitely one of the best languages to go forward with, because a lot of Azure's backend technologies are built on top of C Sharp. So that definitely makes life so much easier for any of us, you know. So C Sharp is definitely the way to go. So that's also one of the reasons why I like working with C Sharp specifically. Hey, Adam, thank you so much for joining in. Wow. If you're up at 6 a.m., that's crazy. You should definitely go to sleep, but thank you so much for hopping over. And I've been seeing some of your work in local actor this time, so big kudos to you for all of that. It's been amazing. I can totally understand that. So if you use C Sharp in a game dev course, chances are I believe you must have used it with Unity. So when you use it with Unity, of course, Unity has its own little little parts and pieces that you need to work with. But otherwise, apart from Unity, C Sharp, one of the biggest use cases there is .NET, and that's what I use C Sharp for. And I feel personally I've had a very comfortable experience because I transitioned towards using C Sharp from Java. So they've been very similar. It's been a very similar experience, and I've personally been very comfortable with C Sharp. So it's again, as I mentioned, it really comes down to personal preference there. So I guess we're ready to begin. So first things first, I mean, you know, we can always have the logger here, but not a problem. Now, when I talk about the request for this, what I'm going to need is I'm going to be taking in coordinates from my Xamarin.Forms application. So first thing I need to do is I need to get a little model ready that is going to be able to accept that's basically going to have the format for my coordinates, so that when I get a call from, you know, when the Xamarin.Forms application calls this function, I'm actually able to take the coordinates in. So I'm just going to create a little folder here called models, and I'm going to have a class there. Because what's going to happen is, so since, you know, we have our the structure, I'm just going to clean it up a little bit in just a very short while. But what happens is that when, you know, when we get JSON content in, when we get JSON string content in here, we can convert it to a C sharp object to make our life working with C sharp a lot easier. So I'm just going to create a model here, and I'm going to call it, let's just see what we want to call it. We can call it coordinates, I guess. I think that's okay. I should have added .cs there. Yeah, so we just call it coordinates.cs. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a namespace here. I'm gonna call it, since we use the company.functions namespace, this is just gonna be company.function.models. That's the name we're gonna keep for this. And we're gonna create a public class called coordinates. So once we do that, we can actually have our model here. So I'm just gonna do one thing. I'm gonna have a public string coordinates, and I'm gonna have a get and a set, a little method there. So what this is gonna do is it's gonna have a little string available for me that I can actually if whenever I get my JSON string, and I can actually just convert that into an object of this format, and it'll automatically convert the coordinates that I get in my JSON string to this and add them here in the string. So we're going to be using the coordinates model for that. And now as I go back to my GPS Twilio CS function, what I'm going to do is I'm actually not going to be taking a get request here. I'm definitely going to be working with post request. So I can actually remove this from here at the moment. And that just means that, I can remove the query link here. Now what happens is that the request body string here, we're definitely going to need that, because this is basically going to take the JSON string from the string body. So we're definitely going to keep this here. And what we'll do is we're going to edit this little name. We're going to keep it for the coordinates class. And I'm just going to, or we can just keep it data for the time being, because I want to use the coordinates little variable later. Now, if you see that it's not able to detect this specific class, and that is because this class uses the company function models namespace. So as as I press control dot, or I just click on this little light bulb here, it will show that I can add this using this namespace here at the top, and it will automatically be able to use this namespace. This is exactly why I love VS Code. It allows me so much freedom when I'm working with all of these different technology. I mean, it makes life very easy. Now, if you see here, as soon as I added the coordinates class, it shows me a little flag here. It underlines this and that, and that's because when I am not using the dynamic data type, I need to specify the format of the class, the object that's going to be created. So I need to add the object name here, and as soon as I do that, it's gonna take in my JSON string and convert it to the coordinates class automatically. So that makes life definitely a very comfortable. Now, the first thing that we want to do here in this function is we want to reverse geocode, right? We want to take this information back. We want to reverse geocode so that we can get the address, the closest address to our coordinates as per the Google Maps API. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you over to the Google Maps API now, and we're going to use their reverse geocoding API to, to actually be able to just get the address back. So as you see, I'm just going to send this link here in the chat. The Google Maps geocoding API is actually a very nifty little piece of tech. And this is the same tech that we're using when we're using Google Maps. So with this, I can actually send in coordinates, and I can get back my formatted address in a nice little format. And that's something that we're definitely gonna, that's gonna be very helpful for us. So, even as I use this little piece of tech here, you'll be able to see that, we've got our API example query, and we can basically, we can use the API key here. Now, one thing we're definitely going to need is we're going to need to set it up in the Google Cloud Console. So I'm also going to send another link here, which will tell you how you can set it up. This is actually going to be a paid service. I had a billing plan available. So I had some credits available from the past. So I am using that. Even if you have some trouble at this step, we still have the coordinate. So the SOS application can still work either way. But this is just an extra step that I wanted to bring in and show, because we're using two different geolocation technologies here. So, once you've got your Google Cloud account set up, you've created a new project in Google Cloud, and you've got your billing account ready. After that, you can just go ahead. You can enable the geocoding API from this documentation, and it's gonna take you to a little page. If it's already enabled, you will see this page here with the manage button. If it's not, it'll ask you to select a billing account for your account, and it will basically ask you to set it up and provide you an API key directly. So since for me, it's already set up, I can just go ahead, click on manage, and after that, I will be able to see this entire overview with the metrics. So if I click on credentials, I will be able to see my API key here. Now, even in case you have some trouble here, just let me know. I can just for the time being maybe help out a bit there. But one thing that we're definitely going to want to do is we're going to want to take this API key and get a response back so that we can understand how the model works, because it's actually quite a massive little account that has a variety of features actually. So I'm just going to do a little test run. I'm going to insert it into my browser and get the response here, so that I can definitely, I can get the response and understand how it's going to work. But what I'm seeing here is that okay, this should be no space. I don't think there's any space. It's gonna take it takes a slight amount of time to load, but it's got additional results as well. So I mean, typically I hope this is good enough for the entire format. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy this, and we've got this lovely little tool here, that we can actually use for our purposes. The it's called Json to C#. That's just a website. And what I can do is, from this response, I can actually go ahead and just convert this entire JSON format. Okay, oops. I guess we're getting a little bit of trouble. So actually, this is exactly why I wanted to get a test run in. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use this to make curl get request. Now that's not something that I always do. So curl request in Postman, I think that's definitely my way to go. Okay, I just realized that I've got Postman here with me, and I don't know why I wanted to send in a curl request. Sorry. Postman, I think, is one of the greatest tools available to test APIs. I think it's made my life very easy. It's going to make everyone's life very easy. And it's a free tool that we all can use. So I'm just going to send a GET request here using Postman. And as soon as that is done, what you can do then is we just get back a little response here, and we can, oops, this API project is not, I'm getting a request denied. That shouldn't be the case. All right. This doesn't seem to have restrictions here. So let me just look into this one. Just give me a second here. I'm just gonna edit the API key, and I see it doesn't have restrictions. So this shouldn't be an issue for the time being. I'm just gonna, oh, I see what happened. So what happened is that I'd actually got multiple keys earlier. I guess, it only copied a part of it because I've just reset it and it seems to work now. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy this JSON response here that I have, and I'm gonna take it back to my JSON to C# class converter, and I'm gonna convert it. So what it's gonna do is it's gonna give me this nice geolocation, the whole format. So, this essentially the JSON content that we have would be in this exact object structure. So I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm gonna copy this, and I am going to create another class here in my models, because this is essentially how my API model is going to look like. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that this is Maps API response. Nice little name, but it's definitely going to let me know what, it's going to help me keep track of what content I'm keeping here. So I'm just going to create a namespace once again. Company, sorry, models. We're going to name this. Actually, we don't need to name this here. We can just actually paste why I'm naming this. And once this is done, what I want to do is I'm just going to rename this root here to Maps API response. Now, if you see, we're getting this little red line under list, and that's because if we just go here and just see, the system collections generic library that's not been added here. So, we just need to add the directive for this. This is going to allow us to use lists in this particular little line. So see that definitely makes life convenient, right? It's great for that purpose. So as soon as this is done, since I have my model here, what I'm gonna do is I am gonna use the coordinates information to send a GET request to this. Now in that case, of course, we're gonna need a Maps API. We're gonna need the code, right? I am not actually gonna copy this here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to add an environment variable, because I had actually configured a little function here on my Azure portal earlier. So I'm just going to configure this to, to just get an environment variable. And once we deploy this to my Azure function, we're going to be able to use it comfortably. So we'll definitely test it then. So in this case, or, let's just make life easier for the time being. I actually have another template file where I'd kept these codes. So we'll just convert those to our files later. So I'm just going to move this secrets file here that I've had lying around if you'd seen on my desktop. And I'll just use this as a class here for the time being. So in case, in case what you see is that, as soon as I add secrets, it's going to show me Google Maps API key. And this is the exact variable name that I've used in my Azure function. So I'll just convert that later. Now, as we look at line 24, we do need that on line 24, because what that does is, so basically when I call this Azure function, this is what is going to convert the parameter in the body of the post request to, it's basically going to convert the JSON content in the post request into the coordinates modular that I'm going to need. So what I'm going to do is, as soon as, since I've got my maps key here and I've got my coordinates in data dot coordinates, I'm going to use this information now to send a request to the Google Maps API. Let me just recheck our little link here. I'm just going to copy this over from Postman, and we're going to make a few edits, because I don't want to be using this exact little thing, right? I'm just going to copy this from here for the time being. And I am now going to create a little HTTP client. This is an inbuilt library. This is again an inbuilt function that we have. Okay. That's a nice little autocomplete little sort of a thing. This is another inbuilt function that we have in the .NET Core libraries, and this allows us to make HTTP requests. So whenever, in this case, since the Google Maps API here deals with, GET requests. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send in a GET request here to this function. And what I'll use here is for our Maps API URL, we have this thing, right? I'm just gonna add my key and language here using the variables I've already got existing there, and I am just gonna add them as Maps API key. Okay, sorry, should have added that there. I'm gonna add Maps API key here, and I'm gonna add coordinates here. So I'm gonna get the content back from the get request here, Maps API content. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna send in a get request. Wait, client dot get string async, and in this, I'll just send my Maps API URL. So using this, it's gonna send me a little response, and with that, what I can do is I can just then convert it using my Maps API response class that I'd created earlier. Maps API response equal to JSON. Oops, sorry. We're gonna just use the JSON convert class here from the Newtonsoft .json library that we have, and we're gonna deserialize this object in the Maps API response class format. So, with this, what we'll be able to do is we'll essentially be able to convert our JSON string here to get the formatted address. So I'm just gonna have another variable here, address, and that what that's gonna essentially be is from my Maps API response. Well, just looking at this little class here that we have, I'm just gonna go ahead to the results class, and then I'm gonna get the formatted address from the very first one. So from if we just looked at this format here that we already have existing, if you see the results class, just going back, scrolling back up, the first address that we get is the one that we're gonna use. Sorry, it's quite a little long. But from the very first address, we're just gonna get the formatted address here. So we're gonna use this. Let me just keep this below. As we look at these coordinates, from the Maps API response, we're gonna use results 0. That's gonna give us the first result that we got. And through that, we're gonna get the formatted address. So as you can see, the formatted address is actually essentially a name given to, the sort of a coordinate that we have already. Yeah, you see the request in Postman. That's actually just something we had to test out the key that we've got available from the Google Cloud, the Google Maps Geolocation API, from the Geocoding API, because since we're using this to reverse geocode our address. So, when we send in a coordinate, it sends back this formatted address here. And if you see the formatted address results aren't just postal addresses, but any way to geographically name a location. So that's essentially what this is. Now, since, I'm just taking back the first response that we got, that's the one that I'll be using. And I'm gonna do one thing here. We've got the address now. So let's create our Twilio function. Now, in order to do that, we're gonna need the Twilio SDK. And for that, I'm gonna use the NuKit package installer from the default .NET command, CLI. So I'm just gonna write this command.NET add package Twilio, and this is gonna download the NuGet package for the Twilio. That's gonna add the Twilio SDK to my .NET application here. So as soon as we've got this ready, it's installed now. So I can just add using Twilio here. Now, if you were there in the Twilio session we had, some time back, we're gonna be using a lot of the same content here in this particular part. So what I'm gonna do is I am gonna actually just hop over once to our okay, we can just go to the Twilio console here. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you where you can get the information from, because once if you've got an account on the Twilio website, you're gonna need your account SID and auth token to authorize these calls. And for that you're also gonna need a number. So you can actually register on twilio.com to get that information. And since I already have it, I'm gonna be going a little faster at this step. So what we can do now is we can just go ahead. Since I've logged into the console, my account SID and my auth token is available here. If you need a number, if you haven't got one already, you can actually just click on these three dots and get a phone number from here. When you create a trial account, it's easier to get a number. Just make sure you get one with SMS capabilities and voice capabilities. We're going to be using SMS here, but having voice is good for later if you want to experiment more with Twilio. So I actually have this with me right now. So I'm just going to go ahead. I'm going to hop back to my VS Code window here. And I am going to save my, I'm just gonna name this Twilio account SID. I'm gonna keep it equal as my secrets dot Twilio account SID, since I'd already got that information back and saved it with me. Then I'm gonna create another one that is Twilio auth token. And I'm going to name this as secrets. I'm just going to store secrets Twilio auth token here. As soon as that's done, I'm going to initialize the Twilio client using this information here that I already have. So once I do this, I can actually start using the Twilio functions here in my library. So, once that is done, what I'll just do is I'll create a little message where message is equal to message. All right. I believe we need to add the REST API at this point. So that is what we're going to be doing. I think I forgot to add the REST API here. We can actually add it later on as well when we're, when we add the content. But we're going to create a little message resource. It's not going to be new message resource. It's just going to be message resource actually, now that I think about it. And I'm just going to check here. I'm going to add the library where this is present. And once that is done, what I'm going to do is I am going to just add okay, 1 second. Let me just add my semicolon. Now for this, I'm going to need three things available. The to number, what is going to happen is that this is going to have the phone number that I want to send the message to. So I'd again save this in my to number here. And what this allows me to do is that, with this essentially, I can just go ahead and send a message to my personal number. Or any SOS number. In this case, it's my personal number because while building, I don't want to freak someone out. The from number is going to be your Twilio number. And what you're going to have to do is, of course, in this particular case, I have it saved, but this is a number you're going to get as soon as you obtain a number from Twilio. So, me just, okay. I need to check what this number was. Yeah, from number, sorry. That's how it saved the variable. And now I'm just gonna have to add the body. So in the body, I'm just gonna add a little message that says, hey there, please come and visit me at, and I'm actually just gonna add the variable that I have created already. So come and visit me at, or maybe we can just change the format. I am not feeling safe. Please find me here. And what I'm gonna do is backslash, and that's just a line break. I'm gonna add the address equal to, and I'm gonna add the address variable that I'd saved earlier. I'm gonna now add another thing here. I'm gonna add my coordinates because I want to send both of that information. So within that, I'm just gonna add coordinates. And these are just variables that I created earlier. I don't need a semicolon there, sorry. So using this, it's actually gonna create a message resource and it's gonna message me. And what I'll do is I'll just log the information. Just gonna do this to just see if this is just gonna be there within my Azure function later. And this is just gonna be a little log to see that the message ID was actually sent. So I'm just creating a little log here. You know what? I just love using this little format. I'm gonna go back to this. Sorry, this is my habits. We've already got the message variable that's been created, and I just need to go and add this. So that's gonna log my message SID. Now after that, since with this specific case, we do not have a very major response here. I'm just gonna send back this message resource. I'm just gonna serialize and send this back. So let me just remove this here. Because we definitely want to, if there are any responses here, the best way to send that back is just have a little JSON that's going back. So I'm just going to convert this and I'm going to serialize the message object that I have. And as soon as that's done, I'm now going to return a new HTTP response message. Now, as soon as I press control dot on this, okay, that's not necessarily a problem so far. I'm gonna add HTTP status code dot okay. And if you see, this is just because just the system.net has actually not been imported. So I'm just gonna add that up here. Sorry, we don't need this. I'm just gonna add that. Now I seem to see a little thing here, and that's because actually we just need to add the content here for this. So the content is going to be a new string content. What I'm essentially going to do is I'm going to convert my response here to the UTF-8 encoding, and I'm going to set encoding dot. Yeah, I'm just going to set this as UTF-8 and specify that this is a JSON format response. And the last thing I need to do after that is just add HTTP response message up here, because until now this is actually not returning an HTTP response message. So I still seem to be getting a little error here, and that is because this needs to be capital. Yeah, that's why. So, we've got our function ready. Now, I think it would be really cool if we could just test it for a second. So what I'm going to do is I have Azure Functions core tools installed. That is something you need in order to test and just, debug Azure Functions on your local device. I am gonna add a link for that so that you can actually download that on your device as well. So you can actually download Azure Functions core tools from the following link. It should be visible in the chat now. I think it's in there now. So you can actually just get it from here and run it on your local device. Just test it here. So I'm just gonna, since I've got this up and running, I'm just gonna go ahead, click F5, and I'm gonna use the same coordinates for the time being that we had here to send a response. So let me just copy this, Control C. I'm gonna totally remove this, but I'm gonna have a key coordinates. The value here is gonna be this, and after that, I'm just gonna add my local function here. So this essentially just hosts this little API on my local, the function on my local host so that I can test it. I need to keep it as a post request, not a get request. If I just move this, you see I can, I just have that there. So I'm just gonna send this little post request here. And it seems like I'm getting a little internal server error. Okay, I'm not sure why that's happening. Let me just look at this once and see where it's gone wrong. Exception while executing. Object reference not set to object. Huh. I'm not totally sure where I'm getting the error. Let me set try catch blocks here so that I can actually get the error once. Because it seems like I'm getting an error somewhere, but I'm not totally sure where that's happening. So I'm just going to disconnect this. I'm going to go ahead, have a little try block. And just add that. Okay, I don't need a try block. I'm just gonna have that around here. And in case an exception is caught, I just want to name that as exception EX. And okay, that makes sense. Message won't run in that case. So in that case, I'll just go back up here. I'm gonna name var message here just for the time being. Remove the variable. Keep it as null for the time being. Am I getting an error on that? Or maybe I could just go ahead and do one thing. In case I can just, add my entire try catch block around this, and in case I run into an error, I'll just return this as null. Empty response. So what I want to do here is I want to see where exactly I'm getting an error. So I'm gonna go ahead, or I'm gonna create a log, and I'm gonna log this information here. So that way I can actually see where I'm getting stuck. So I'm just gonna say exception.message. And I need to add where here. Now let's make this a little easier on the eye. So I'll just select this entire content, add a tab, and that's just going to shift it a little ahead. So it just looks a little easier to the eye. And let's run this once again, see where we're getting stuck. What exact line is messing us up. Okay, it seems to be running at the same link. I'm just going to send. Value cannot be none. Looks like instead of logging, I should just, this is an error, but I'm not seeing where the message is coming. So I'll just add a console.title in here instead. And if it's giving me a null error at that point, then I can just, just reload it once. See, this is how these things get a little tricky at times because this is something I'm creating for the very first time ever. I mean, once this is done, then things are a little more comfortable because a little Xamarin app to send a little SOS message is something I've actually worked with in the past. So I've got a little bit of leeway there. That's something we can definitely more comfortably work with. But let's see where we're getting stuck here. So I'm just going to send my post request once again. It's executing. Object reference not set to an instance of object. It ran all right this time. I'm not getting which line this is coming to. So let's see, let's debug this. Object reference not set to an instance is typically an error when for a variable that tends to hold a null value. I'm getting a feeling this is around the address. So, because there's a chance that, this might be the address, but let me try one thing. I'm just going to take my screen off for a second because I think where this is getting messed up, it'll just take me a second to fix that. I think I've figured it out. Chances are I'm using an incorrect key in my secrets function here that I have. So I'm just gonna go, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna fix that. And as soon as that is done, we should be able to move forward. I'll also check my Twilio key once in order to see that I haven't made a mess up there. And as soon as that's done, I'm just gonna try it once again to ensure that I'm not we don't get stuck in a similar issue again. because you know what? I just realized where we've gone wrong, and I really hope, because if this was the error, then I really hope this wasn't the only error, but there's a chance that this was. And if this was, I'm really gonna beat myself up over this. But turns out I might have just been sending the request the wrong way. So I'm just gonna go back and add this to stream, and I really hope this is okay, because if this works, it's gonna be very embarrassing. It's sending the request. Oh God. It was totally all right. You know what was happening was that I was actually trying to send the HTTP request in the wrong manner, and it was totally all right. Sorry, my bad. The code works, the function works. It's totally cool, and it has executed successfully. So I'm just going to do one thing now. I am going to deploy this to Azure, and as soon as that is done, I will then I will just begin working on the application here. So if you can actually see, let me just show you here. We've got the message successfully. We've actually got the address here, and we've got the coordinates as well. So this works. This is totally cool. Now, that was sending the post request in the wrong manner. It was totally all right. It was working properly. So let's do one thing now. Let's start working on the Xamarin application. And in the meantime, I am also going to deploy this to Azure. So in order to do that, you can actually just, click on deploy to function app. If you want to create a new app, you can always do that. You can create a new function app. I actually have this little application created because I wanted to preset it to GPS value and add my environment variables, but you can always go ahead, just create new function app using the steps here, and it'll create a function app for you. I'm going to upload this to the existing one though. I'll just deploy it here. And with this, I should be able to actually, be able to use the same that very API key. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create. In the meantime, I'm gonna start creating a new project. We're gonna create a blank Xamarin.Forms application. Yeah, that's the one I need. I'm gonna create a mobile app here. We're gonna name it Xamarin GPS LHD. Actually, no, Xamarin GPS SOS LHD. Nice long name, but it tells me, exactly what I need to know about this session. So that's exactly why I've gone with this name. I don't, however, want to keep this in that specific folder. I want to keep it on my desktop instead. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to have a project created here. So, let me just see. I hope that's the right spellings for everything. But yeah, okay, cool. So, on the desktop, it's going to create a project in this with this specific name. And, I will not create it for iOS for the time being. I'm just going to keep it to Android because I am on a Windows device. I do not have a Mac with me, so I can't debug an iOS application. But Android works. And if you're working with iOS, you can always work with iOS. That's not a problem at all. So I'm just gonna create this here. So it's gonna create a little project for me. And what I can do then is I can, just start working within this. It's gonna create a Hello World application for me. And it seems like, it's actually deployed our function app here to Azure. So that's absolutely awesome. That's great to know. And we've got a link here as well. That's the link for my app. I'm just gonna copy this for the time being, and I'm gonna close VS Code now. Since we've got this up and running. In the meantime, let me just do a one test run, just a test run once again, to just to see that everything's working all right, and everything works all right. So I feel so bad for doing this. This was totally unnecessary, but yeah, great. So I'm just gonna minimize this for the time being. Now, in the meantime, while we were just playing around with this, Visual Studio IDE made a Xamarin app, Hello World app for us. A bit code through here. All right, let me get done with the. Oh, you know what? Actually, it would be a better thing to just go back to that here. I'm gonna read through once again, and I'm gonna tell you, just a recap of everything we did in the function. So what we did is we created an Azure function, and within that Azure function, we okay. I end up keep showing this little file here, and I'm not supposed to do that, but well, can't help it. So what happens is that I take this little folder here. I was supposed to use environment variables, but I didn't at the time being. My bad. Sorry about that. So what happens is that I just took this Azure function here. What this did was this was there as a part of my application by default. It has my stream reader. It has my it allows me to take the JSON content that I'm getting as a part of the post request, and basically it converts it just takes it in and converts it to a JSON string here. And once that is done, I just deserialize it into an object that I created. This is just what this is going to do is this function is going to take it's going to get the coordinates from the Xamarin application here. Now, as soon as that is done, I take the coordinates. I go ahead, I get the coordinates out of this class that, that I obtained by converting that JSON content. I have a Google Maps API key that, I showed earlier. That what that does is basically, within that I am able to, and within that, that's how I'm going to use the reverse geocoding API. The geocoding API, I can reverse geocode my coordinates to get an address as well. So that's exactly why I need this. Now, this little line here, this is the HTTP client. This is just a part of .NET which allows me to send HTTP requests, be it get, post, port, delete, any of the HTTP requests. And as you know, as soon as I've got that ready, I then send a GET request to the Google Maps Geocode API and get a little class back from that, in the entire format, so that I can get the formatted address from Google Maps for my specific coordinates. So the best address that it has for me is what I get back, and that address and the coordinates that I have is what I then go use in the Twilio API. So I use the Twilio API there to send this SOS message out. So that's essentially what I'm using it for. So that's a basic run through. And now since I've got that function up and running, I'm just gonna remove. I'll actually change these. I'm gonna make these environmental variables, and I'm gonna redeploy it. Environment dot get environment variables. Since I've actually got these environment variables in this format on my Twilio account, on my Azure function, or even if I don't, I can do this later as well. That's not a problem. I'll just hop back since the function is running already. I'm just gonna hop back and I'll work with the Xamarin app now. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna build this Hello World application that has been created for me by the code scaffolding. It's gonna build the app for me. Now this can take a small amount of time. That's just something, that's the Azure Functions API link that I got once I deployed it. And I'm just gonna, okay, it seems like the emulator can't be started. I am not sure why that is, but let me look into that once. I'm just gonna see why that's happening. That typically should not be happening. So let me just look into this for a second. I'm just gonna close this for the time being. Okay, seems like it should be running. I'm just gonna stop it for a second if it's giving me a little trouble there, because this is always. Seems like it got the emulator back up and running, so I'm not sure why exactly I had trouble there. But yeah, it seems to work for the time being. Building this, I'm seeing some trouble here because I'm trying to stream, and Visual Studio is heavy. It is very heavy. So it takes a toll on my system. So let me just do one thing. I'm gonna go to my mobility center. Let's go to high performance and hope that helps us out a bit, because this is really gonna take up a chunk of system resources. Wow, this is taking a toll on my system. Yeah, that should be better. But in the meantime, I need to stop the build. And I'm okay, yeah, this is heavy. I'm really confused as to why I'm having this trouble here, because it should be working, to be honest. Let me just force stop this for a second. I'm going to get this back up and running because this process is kind of stuck here. Although it seems to be ready, so I'm really confused as to why I'm stuck here. Okay, I'm going to get the emulator back up and running and see if that starts deploying, because it should be built already. Yes, I'm just going to continue for a second. I'm just going to start debugging once again. It works now. It works this time. Yes, good. So this time, it's okay. Not an issue for the time being. This particular time, it should work all right. So it's just gonna build this for me. And as soon as the build is ready, it's gonna deploy my Hello World app. And then I'm gonna show how exactly that happened. I know that's a great tool. Thank you so much for sharing that, Sudipto. That's a great tool. And I'm gonna check it out. But in this case, the only thing that I need is my location services, and that works for me. So that's good enough. It's just that the first deployment sometimes take a little bit of time, but we should be good very soon. This can always take a chunk of time, so I'm just, yeah, I mean, it's found the device, so that just means it's running. It takes a little time building it for the first time ever. That's something that I've noticed. That's a pattern that I've noticed in the past as well. So this is nothing to worry about. As soon as this first build is done, after that, it's going to be a little easier for us to build in the subsequent times. And yeah, in the meantime, I hope you're having an all right experience. Just let me know in case you have any doubts or queries. So, yeah, that's our Hello World application. And I'll actually show you the little content code for this here. So, if I look at main page here, main page.xaml, that is extensible application markup language. As you check that out, that actually has all the content. If you see here, that has the little content that we've got up and running. It's got the labels, it's got the formatted text, and there we can see this all of this content here on screen. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start editing this just to make sure that we are able to send in, we can send uh, we can send that SOS command here. I'm just going to name this here, rename this here to SOS app. Remove all of these labels because we don't need these for the time being. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a button here. That's what I need. So this button, let's just stop debugging for a second. So I think one of the best things about the Visual Studio IDEA is that actually with Xamarin I can get all of these different tools and all. So the button is something I can create manually as well, or I just double click here and it adds that for me. You can do both of these. So on the button, all I need to do here is I'll just add the text here. Send SOS. And I'm just gonna add the next on a clicked event. So when I add a clicked event, what this is gonna do is it's gonna add an event handler. So as soon as this is done, it's gonna invoke the command that I want for this button. So I'm gonna add a new event handler here, and then we're gonna start playing around with the backend. We're waiting for the production build. No, we're not exactly waiting for the production build. Okay. We're just currently creating our debug right now for the time being. That's what we're creating. Now, in order to get the coordinates here from our local device, what I'm going to use is I'm going to use the Xamarin Essentials Geolocation API. Now, what that does is with that, I can basically use the GPS module already present in my phone, the one that we use for our location services. And I'm going to use that to get a latitude and a longitude. So for that, let me just bring over this little website here, which is the documentation for the Geolocation API. So, using the Geolocation API, I can actually utilize the already present little module here in my phone and get the latitude, longitude, and altitude of where I am at that point. So in order to get this up and running, first things first, I need to add a few properties here to my my information in my Xamarin app, in my Android application. So in order to do that, what I gotta do is I can just go ahead to properties here in the Android app. This is specifically for the Android, and I hop over to the manifest, or I can play around with assembly info. I can actually work with either of them. In either case, I just go ahead. I see this, right? I'm gonna add my properties here. I just need to do one or the other. You can, it's your choice totally. I'm gonna do it in assembly info, but you can add it in the XML file as well. So I'm just gonna use these permissions and update these here and just save this file. So, this way, basically, it specifies that, this application will end up using the specific hardware on my device. And then, as soon as that is done, we're going to scroll down. In case your application is targeting just Android 10 or higher and is requesting location always, you need to add the following permission. However, that's not something we're doing right now. Even currently, since the device I have here is an Android 9 device, we don't need this. However, this is something you can always add if you have a higher if you're targeting a higher API level. Plus, this is not a device that will always request for location always, although that would be a good thing to have, it's not mandatory. In this specific case, I wouldn't be using that. So once that is done, after that, I need to have Xamarin Essentials in my application. I need to start it. I need to create it, in my function. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna check and see if I have Xamarin Essentials installed. What you can do to check that is, just go over to tools in our toolbar up there, and we go manage NuGet packages here from the NuGet package manager. And if we have Xamarin Essentials installed, it's going to show it to me there. Typically, it does come in with the code scaffolding from what I've noticed. So, we already have it installed, which is fantastic for us. Even if you don't, in case you don't have it installed, you can just browse and download this from there. So since we have this installed, that makes life easier for us. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to check my Android here to see if it's initializing Xamarin Essentials anyway, and it is. So Xamarin Essentials is getting initialized even as per my instructions here. So I don't need to add this separately right now. We do, however, need to add, this little function. Let me see, I think I'm missing. Seems like we have this present as well. So, that's exactly why Visual Studio is great. It's made life convenient. I have all of this information already. So now we're going to start using geolocation. So the first step to do that is just hop back to the main page XML. We have the xml.cs file here, and I'm going to add using Xamarin.essentials here. And in this little button click that we have, now we're ready to start working with the geolocation API. So I'm just going to scroll below here and get to the get location async documentation. So what this does is this will allow us to get the location here in this function. So first things first, I need a little cancellation token source here because we need that when we're calling the get location function. It's going to be an asynchronous task, so I'm just going to change and modify that later in a second. Let me just get this, copy this here. And I'm just going to explain this in a second, as soon as we've brought this over from the documentation. And we're going to change the geolocation accuracy there. It's taking time to gather. I'm using system.threading. And one more thing that I need to do here is make this an asynchronous task. So what this essentially does here, this function that we've got here, what this will do is that, this will create a request to the geolocation API available within Xamarin Essentials, the entire Xamarin Essentials library, which is a dedicated little library here that we have for Xamarin applications, and it features a nice little number of different APIs, and it just makes life easier for us to use. So now, the cancellation token resource that we just use, it essentially is used to signal to a cancellation token that it should be cancelled. It basically is a notification that, once we've got this request, then, once you've got that location, after that, it can stop using that specific aspect. Now, that's just what the cancellation token source is for. Nothing to worry about too much. One thing we're going to do is we're going to change this from medium to best, because what we want to do is we want to get the most accurate location. So we've got low, medium, high, and best. Those are a few accuracy types that we've got here. And if you look at this template, you can see that, if location is not null, we get this different information, right? Now, if location is not null, then in that case, what we want to do is we want to just go ahead, and instead of having this console write line, we're going to create a little variable coordinates, and that will be equal to a string that we have in the exact format that we had for our method there, because that's exactly why we want to use this. And we're actually going to need a little model class here as well for the post request. So I'm just going to do one thing. I am going to add location dot latitude and sorry, I needed this here. And I'm going to add location dot longitude. So what this is going to do is it's going to send my latitude and longitude. These are the coordinates, and it's in the format that we need for our Azure function there. So I'm just going to remove this for a second, and I'm going to go ahead. We're going to create a little model here that we can actually add, So once this is selected, I want to go ahead and maybe, just add a new folder called models. And within that folder, I am going to add a new item. I'm going to add a new class there. And this class is going to be called coordinates as well. So, as soon as I create this coordinates class here, I'm just going to go ahead and add a string, public string coordinates. And I'm going to have a get and a set function here. So, this is ready. This little model is ready. We can just close this for the time being. We again do not need this right now. So the next thing I'm going to do here is that I'm going to have we're going to need to import that as well. So I'm going to add using sos.models. And once that is done, we can actually start using the coordinates class. Or I can just keep it as data for the time being. Equal to new coordinates. I'm just going to rename this in order to keep it a little distinct, so that it's a little easier to understand what we're doing here, because in the coordinates string there in the coordinates class, we're going to be saving this information. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to serialize this object into JSON information. So the next thing what I'm going to do is we're going to go back to Newtonsoft. We're going to have that installed for our application here, and we're going to use the NuGet package manager to do that. So I'm just going to go ahead. I am getting my NuGet package manager up here. We're going to browse. Here we search for this lovely little thing, Newtonsoft. And Newtonsoft.json is actually one of the most popular NuGet packages that we have for .NET developers. It makes working with JSON content very easy. So this actually, if you see, has 954 million downloads. That's pretty cool. So I'm just going to install this. And it's going to show the output from the package manager. So I'm just going to go ahead, install this, and after that I'll be able to use this in my function again. Successfully installed. Nice, that was quick. I really hope this hasn't totally frozen. Okay. Because first thing I want to do is just I want to save this once. Because if it gets stuck at this point, it's going to become very problematic. Oh wait, no, not this, not the log. I just want to save this. So if you see now Newtonsoft.json is installed, I can actually find it here in the NuGet packages in my installed packages as well. So within this list it's available. So I can use this now for my application. So I'm just gonna go ahead. I'm gonna close these few extra little tabs I've got open here. Close the toolbox. And now next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and Newtonsoft JSON here so that we can actually use this, because we're gonna need this for our request, right? We're gonna need this for our post request that we make to our Azure function that we've created. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna create an HTTP client here. And just adding this at the top. Next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna serialize this content. I'm gonna, using this, since we're using this client for the response, I need to just create JSON and then just serialize that data so that we can send it to our Azure function. So next thing that I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna create this JSON here, where JSON is equal to JSON convert dot serialize object, and we're gonna have data here. Since that is the object we want to serialize. Next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna add this to, we're gonna create a some new content, and we're gonna convert this JSON to the same UTF encoding that we had earlier, that I had shown back then when we were sending back that response. So if you see, I'm gonna, let's see if we get a little, okay, just once, we will let that be for the time being. I'm gonna add JSON, since that is our response, that's our JSON response. Even earlier, since when we used res, we had JSON, we had that JSON response in that res. So we're gonna add the JSON content here. I'm gonna specify the encoding. And after that, I just want to specify that this is JSON content. So this little line here, it's told us that just as last time, this is the format for the string content. And now we're gonna send our HTTP request to our Azure function here. So where response is gonna be, oh wait, since it's an asynchronous function here, we're gonna have client dot post async. And here is where we're gonna bring back that URL. This is exactly why I had not yet closed Postman, because I wanted my URL here. We can keep this as a separate variable or directly add it, either works. And we're just gonna add content here. So once this is done, if this works, it's just gonna send back my message. I say it's gonna it's gonna send back the result. So for the result, I just want to convert this response into a string for my purposes. So I'm gonna use await response dot content dot read a string async, and this function is just gonna convert it to a string, so I can read this response later. So I can actually just print it to the console, or even if I in debugging it, it's really all right. Whatever we do, even if I want to convert it to a model, I can. So and I'm just gonna do one thing. I'm just gonna display this if it works, because like if I get the entire result, then that just means my function worked. Even if it, I mean, that's just for the time being that I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna use. So I'm just gonna mention response. That's just the format for the display alert. What this is gonna do is it's gonna show it as a little pop-up in the middle of my screen. And in case, we don't get the location at all, if the location is null, I'm just gonna have another display alert. Display alert location not found. And okay. So, we're actually ready with this little application. So let's just test it. We're gonna run it and we're gonna test it. And I really hope this works. It's always a hope. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. In the meantime, I'll just check the chat once. Thank you so much for that, Sudipto. It's actually nice. I mean, it's great if you work with native apps. It's gonna make working with Xamarin so much more easy. It's just gonna make it a lot easier. But Xamarin's nice. It's nice to work with. And for anyone just not checking, this is a Xamarin t-shirt because like Xamarin is just one of my favorite technologies. So I'm always repping Xamarin. That's a little Xamarin monkey. So yeah, Xamarin's one of my favorite tech. Hey, it's totally all right if you just joined. We're actually getting closer to the conclusion, but you can always go back and check out the stream later. That's not an issue at all. I'm just gonna hope this works right now. That's all I'm hoping for. For now, don't mind the UI. It's gonna be a little messy. It's probably not gonna look very good. I have not added the formatting. I just want the button up and running. We can play around with the UI a little once, we've got that backend code running because that's what is priority for me at the moment to just get this function up and running. So while, it's building this app, it had a project while building the app. That is not something I saw coming, to be honest. Okay. I'm just gonna see how I can just cancel this build and restart it in a. I'm just gonna cancel this for a second. We're gonna go back to debug and we're gonna start debugging once. Okay, it's not found with the correct signature. Huh. 1 second. This should be all right. It should work, to be honest. I'm guessing it had a little trouble with the task there, but we should be able to get this up and running because it should be building right now. So in the meantime, yeah, do let me know if you have any queries, if anyone has any queries. Yep, it's building now. So well, with the asynchronous functions, it's always recommended to use task, I guess. It had little trouble with the event handler there. I just went back to Word. That seems to work. So it's finally building. It's finally building. Please don't mind the UI. I've just not worked on the UI so far. That's been the that's been a slight issue there. So that's something that's not an issue. You can actually edit the UI later. I'm gonna make a few edits here on screen, once we've got this. Let's found the emulator. Deployment is successful. Nice. Let's hope this works. I'm really counting on this to work right now. It's initializing. Sorry about the little trouble. That's actually just that, right now my system's got a bit of load. We've got Visual Studio, we've got the emulator, we've got streaming going. So there's a lot going. We've got this up finally. So let's hope this works. And if this works, yeah, we need to allow the device location. If this works, it's going to send a response. It's going to show the response here on screen. And I'm going to get a message. So I'm really hoping that, yes, it has worked. So if you see there's this entire crazy little response there, and I'm going to show you something really cool right now. If I go back and if I check the settings of this device, it's going to show me these controls here, and it's going to show location, which was set to this point here in Mountain View, California. Okay, it's set somewhere here. And if you check my screen right now, I've got a response from Mountain View, California with those coordinates. So it works. I am so happy it works. This is a nice little SOS application that we have here. That's absolutely working perfectly. So yay, yay to us. So yeah, we finally got it up and running. Now, you can play around with the UI. Just, maybe if you want to send it little, send it below. Just center it on the screen. We can always do that. What this is going to do is, yeah, it's going to send it down. Yeah. So there's always so much that you can do, to be honest. Even if I do this, as you know, there's always stuff you can play around with here. But bottom line is this application works. So that's awesome. We've got the application up and running. And yeah, right now I'm not going to be pushing to GitHub and showing how to do it, but make sure you get this up and running on DevPost. I'm going to throw that link in. That's definitely going to be great. So for this, I've actually used Twilio here in my Azure function. If you check out the Azure function we built, we used Twilio for this. And yeah, you can use Vonage as well. Vonage's APIs are also good. You can definitely check those out. I haven't worked as much with Vonage, but Twilio is what I've used here. It definitely works. So that's great. Do we have any queries? I'm also just going to send in the dev post page for this. So, we can just, go ahead afterwards. You can go ahead and submit this application. So just give me a second. And I believe this is, that's interesting. And I'm just going to have to check for the dev post link once. I think I'm having a little trouble. All right, I'm just going to hop over to Discord once to see. You can definitely make an application, for this specific, even if you go ahead with the Azure function that has some of the geolocation work, but an entire end-to-end application would be great. So thanks for throwing that in, Sudipto. I think I was actually just checking that out. and I was having a little trouble accessing it. So that's something I'll just look into once. But thanks for throwing that in, sharing that link there. And the application works, but I want you to learn Xamarin definitely and try that out yourself. Or I mean, if you know, if you with the Azure function, you can build it in whatever language, and it's essentially just, if you can work with Android or iOS, whatever you prefer, feel free, go ahead. The basic thing is that you've got to get the coordinates from your the geolocation, and I've used my Xamarin Essentials API there because that just makes my life a lot easier. But yeah, it's totally your call. Ah, yes. The share weekend link is up. I was just having some trouble. I think I mistyped it. So Netlify function, I'm not sure how those work. I haven't tried those. Azure Functions, that's just a very nifty little serverless um, offering from Microsoft. And I've been working with Azure Functions a bit. So, that's just my preferred tech. And of course, as always, Xamarin. You can see I'm repping Xamarin already, and I love Xamarin. And yeah, I love this little thing. Another, that's a Xamarin monkey mascot. So yeah, a little Xamarin rep going on there. But well, I mean, if I love that thing, so can't help it. So once you're done with this, make sure you go ahead and you join in and make a submission, and be sure to select use GPS or maps technology. Even if it's a different sort of a project, you can always try working with that and sending that in, but make sure to do that. It's gonna be great. And that'll help you get that point in as well. So win-win. So that is about it from my side. It's been a long stream, and I know that Xamarin Toy is the best. I know, I absolutely love this thing. You can actually get this on the .NET Foundation store. It's up available there. So if you need this, I can actually share a link with you for the .NET Foundation store, and you can actually check it out there once. And if you really, really like it, then who knows? If you might want to get it, you might want to get it. So specifically for this Xamarin Plush Monkey, this is actually just for $6. So you can, and then there's shipping otherwise. So in this case, shipping is gonna be more than the actual thing. But yeah, so that's about it from my side. I hope you all have had a good experience. And be sure to join in here on the dev post, make your submission, get that in. And I guess we're good. That is absolutely lovely to hear. So if you get that done, do let me know. I'm gonna give that stream a shout out. So just let me know afterwards. Because if you're gonna do that in your Twitch, I would love to join your audience and see how that goes, or if help out if you need that. What's the link for my dev post? So I haven't created my dev post. I'm not creating that right now immediately, because I've realized that I want you all to work on this and create your own thing as well. That would actually help you all learn a lot better. So it would be great if you build this yourself. Follow the tutorial, follow what I've done, and then build it yourself. So I guess that's about it from my side. Thank you so much to all of you for joining in. We've already exceeded the time that I thought, but it's been great working with all of you on this. I think I've had a lot of fun. I hope you all like this application as well. And do stay active in Local Act Day. We're at the weekend finally. There's going to be some fun stuff here. So thank you so much to everyone, and have a great weekend. Bye-bye.